Greetings all. Welcome back to another episode of the Coptimizer podcast. Today's guest is Chad. I'm going to throw in there Michael because it's in the title of your book. Chad Michael Bruckner. Chad is the author of the Holy Trinity of Successful and Healthy Police Organizations, Improving Leadership, Culture, and Wellness. He's an Army veteran, police veteran, and just kind of a good Renaissance eclectic type of background, just the type of person we like to chat with. So welcome to the show.
Hey, Patrick, how you doing, brother? Thanks for having me.
All right, let's kind of jump right in.
Yeah, let's do it, brother.
We have birth roots in the same area, right around the Philadelphia area, Philadelphia suburbs. I was my mom and dad are from Scranton. A lot of extended family in Scranton. I was born in Westchester and then carted off to the Midwest as a young child, where I went from being a Phillies fan to a Cubs fan, as hard as it might be. I'm still an Eagles guy, but I like to root for the Colts, and I don't know. Always a bit of a mix. But so where are you
Philly
from?
sports, man. I was actually at the Phillies game last night, Patrick.
Oh,
Game one of the playoffs, man. 4-1 victory. It was incredible. So I went to the World Series last year, and I've never seen so much energy. It might have been the same as the World Series last year. It was incredible. I sat 10 minutes the entire game watching on my feet every other time. It was unbelievable. So love it.
Well, I'm hoping they can bring it home. They're definitely They're definitely my favorite.
And I'm sorry about your Cubs, man. I'm sorry about the Cubs. I thought they were going to make it in. I did.
Dude, they totally, well, I don't even want to go down the baseball path because, baseball, it's like all professional sports. From time to time, they just really, really, they really piss me off. And it has nothing to do with the sport. It's like, let baseball be baseball, but that can be an alienating topic. So, this is probably, I have 3 boys. They all played baseball at one time or another. My youngest is in high school still and playing baseball. So I love baseball. So it breaks my heart sometimes to not sometimes feel that draw to be a fan. But anyway, I digress.
I get it. Sports is a heartbreaking thing. It always is.
Always is. It can be a uniter and a divider.
Exactly.
It's like technology.
That's true. That is very true.
So tell me a little bit about, let's start with your childhood.
Yeah.
And then a little touch on your military background and then go back to school, because you set it up nicely in your book. And I think you've got a great message to share. And I think no matter where anyone is in their police organization, from a rookie just starting out to a veteran police chief, there's tons of lessons that people can learn. So let's get at it.
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I never wanted to be a police officer. My mom wanted me to be one, and I never wanted to be one. But I grew up in a great town, and the only contact I had with police officers was speeding tickets. I got my license at 16, and I was out past midnight when there's a curfew, 12 o'clock curfew, and got pulled over, and dad had to come pick me up. So my only experience with law enforcement was so limited. It was just traffic citations. Great officers, nice interactions, but the job itself, I thought of myself, I need to do more than write traffic tickets. So having that little limited perspective, I've always kind of went against what my mom said. Interestingly, it was when
it's good to know that they at least had curfew laws back then. I don't know what it's like out there anymore. They pretty much have all gone away.
Yeah, everything is kind of free for all. I mean, there is, but I don't think the enforcement side of it gets really done as much as it used to. Interestingly, when I was in Iraq I was in the Army for 8 years. My final year is when I did a combat tour in Iraq, and we were in the north end of the Sunni Triangle, operating in the second largest oil refinery city in Iraq. And man, what an experience that was, because so many. But the one I'll say as it relates to policing is, it was the first time I was an infantryman. So we were training to shoot, move, communicate, and kill. I mean, that was our mission statement: shoot, move, communicate, and kill. And we never had to deal with citizens or develop informants, anything like that. It was a woodland, in the woods type of training. And then 9/11 happened, and we started doing urban training and started learning how to use civil affairs to cultivate informants. So things that I was learning that were new to me, and even in the Army side at 24, 25, these were new experiences. And I remember being in Iraq and developing intelligence from Iraqi soldiers, from Iraqi citizens, building relationships with them, which to me was the most impactful because that's how you get the best information. Just those experiences without thinking of it through the lens of law enforcement made me realize when I came home and having further conversations with my mom about what policing is, I said, you know what, I think there's a little bit more than writing traffic tickets. So that experience in Iraq was a huge turning point for me. And then of course, what I also needed was I met my wife the summer I came back from Iraq. And that was she was a school teacher, had a master's degree, had her own house. I was living in the same boyhood bed as I grew up in at my parents' house. I didn't even have a car because I was in the Army and overseas, so there's no need to have one. So there was just a lot of learning I was doing on the civilian side going through that transition. When I met my wife, and man, she really made me realize of relationship capital, how much I want to marry her, how much I want to take care and provide for her, and therefore I need a career to do that. So at this time, I didn't even have a job, Patrick, at that time when I met her. So so I was full speed ahead in 2007 to go get police academy, go get my certification, go be a cop, go be a great cop, take care of my wife, have a family. That was where my mode is at that time.
So where you became an officer, did you have to be hired by an agency to go to the academy, or could you put yourself through the academy and then get hired post academy certification, or both?
You could put yourself through, and that's what I did. I used the VA, the GI Bill to put myself through. And I would say to my class, there were 20 of us. I think only 3 or 4 had jobs, or maybe 5 or 6. The rest of us put ourselves through, and it was pretty inspiring when you look back at that. Is how many people are putting betting on themselves, having a chance to say, I'm going to spend this money, invest in myself. And then during these studies, during this academy process, I'm going to apply to jobs and interview and apply. And it's there's a lot of credit we should be given. I think the police cadets more than we do that do that path, because that is not an easy path, especially if you don't know if it's going to work or not. If you have, that other than just that belief in yourself.
Yeah. It's an interesting aside, just to chat about it for a minute, because every state is a little bit different. And, since in the post 2020 environment, the whole concept or discussion around reimagining policing, the idea of training comes up frequently. How do you properly prepare and train a police officer? Is it best to do it in a centralized academy setting? Is it best to take like the European model, or what they do in Australia, where people go to policing colleges, like you're literally a college student going through policing? And some states in the U.S. have similar programs. Florida, I think, has parts of theirs that's like that. But yeah, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it, because the academy that I went to, at first you had to be hired, and then the agency would send you through and pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was one of the first classes that actually allowed people to put themselves through the academy. And we had a Marine Corps retiree that was in our class, and a couple of others that eventually, they got hired afterwards. And I know now in this competitive environment, if you put yourself through the academy, there's chiefs and recruiters waiting on graduation day. They're waiting there to hand you cards like, hey, come to our agency, because now we don't have to pay to send you through the academy. You've made that investment in yourself. The downside to that is that you can potentially have candidates that will put themselves through that probably don't have an opportunity, or probably shouldn't have an opportunity, to work for a policing agency based on issues that maybe they have in their background or other things. And they're just looking to, give themselves a chance to get their foot in the door when they probably shouldn't. So like anything else, I guess if you do your proper vetting, that shouldn't be a problem either way.
Yeah, the academy I went to, and I ended up teaching there for 4 years later, and I just had great relationships. I thought they do a really good job for being a municipal police academy that's run through a community college. I mean, I come from the military, where my method, I think the best, most efficient way to train somebody is to go off site. You and me, we're going to live together for X number of days, whatever we can afford together, and that you're going to get that immersion. Going to a community college part-time or full-time while you're working and taking care of a family, applying to police departments. Like there's so much more layers to it to develop
Yeah.
and prepare yourself for that career. And I thought my community college where I went did a really, really good job of understanding that. They did an interview process when I went in 07 or 06. I never forget it. I sat with the director doing an interview and he said, "Why do you want to be a police officer?" I wasn't even a cop yet. And I'm trying to get into the academy. And he's asking me all these questions about why I want to be a cop. So the level of vetting, at least there, I was happy with. We also lost somebody in the academy that probably was that one person you were talking about who you weren't sure like what were their intentions, and they ended up washing out anyway. So because I think this is a job and a career, served along with me, you got to really want to be in it to stay in it long term, because you're going to change or things are going to happen that are just part of this job.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to go too far down this path, but I think it is interesting to discuss if somebody's willing to put themselves through school to get those certifications. You're not necessarily, the agency isn't making that initial investment, because when it comes to recruitment and retention issues right now, which it's so competitive in the environment to find good talent, we're we're cannibalizing each other in policing through incentives like cash bonuses and stuff like that are probably not, if in the grand scheme of things, maybe not the best way to incentivize. How do you attract the right people to your agency? But one of the arguments that chiefs will make, and one of the reasons why you go through such extensive background and research, is like when I hire somebody, I'm really hoping that I have them for an extended period of time. And we're now seeing these turnover rates in that first 3 years upwards to 20 to 30%, where we never used to see that before. And now you see cash going out the door when an officer goes out the door, because man, we spent all that time investing, and they really didn't have any intention of staying with our agency. They just used us to go somewhere else. And again, interestingly, 20 years ago, it was always smaller departments getting manipulated like that, and larger agencies that had more opportunities, better pay, better training, they tended to pull candidates. But it's been kind of the reverse in the last few years, where these
I
large
love this, by the way.
agencies are
I
getting
love it.
siphoned off. Like they're all going to.
I love it. If you're going to create bad cultures, let's go down this road. If we're going to create bad cultures, because this is why people leave, I really believe it. I don't think the money is nearly, we keep throwing monies at these solutions. I think money is a factor. Sure, we want to be compensated more compared to
fourth and fifth, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's what it is on the list.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. I think, like Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. If you build it, they will come. I've experienced this in my own workplace events in the Army or police work as well, where people have chosen to work in places I've been in, units I've been in, because of the fun we're having, or of what we're building, or the impact we're having on things. Nothing about money, nothing about the potential for advancement. It was being a part of something special. So I think if we focus, really, really focus, and this is what P2 is doing, which is amazing to be involved in it. Really focus on culture. I think everything flows through the culture. It doesn't mean that it's free of conflict or free of strife or free of problems. What the culture does, I believe, it allows us to eat through those things quicker. We just chew through those problems because we have a strong culture, and people are going to kind of want to be there. I talked to a police cadet the other day, and he was asking me in this area, this Philly area where I live, what police department's good one to work for? I was like, these are questions you never heard before. I took my first police officer job because you were told.
Yeah, the one you can get it hired at is the one. It's the one, but it's not like that anymore.
No, and you know what I said? I said I don't know because I've been out, but I tell you, focus on culture. Ask around and ask about the culture. That will tell you what you need to know. Everything else, the money and contract negotiations and take-home cars or canine opportunities. Yeah, obviously those are going to be department specific if that's what you really know and want. But for me, I didn't know anything other than I just want to be a cop and serve my community. So I think for those people that are young and like that now, the only thing I can tell them is, find a department with a great culture. Because I think we're learning if you don't go somewhere with a great culture, the shelf life might not be that long, and it might not be in a place where you can thrive in. And God forbid you go through a challenge, is that going to be an environment for you to also pull yourself back up in?
You have to find the right fit, right? Because sometimes it's not a culture issue. Sometimes it's just a fit issue. Like the pace is too fast, or the work
that's a good point. Yeah.
And if you get the wrong person in the wrong environment, then that can be a path towards misery, and that's not good for either party.
No.
So yeah, I get that question a lot, and one of the things that I strongly encourage young people to do that are interested in this profession is go do a ride along.
Mm.
Agencies, and if an agency doesn't want to give you a ride along, I don't know if I'd want to look there anyway, because
Patrick, we got rid of ride-alongs in my area. Like most of the departments got rid of them because of liability. So
yeah, I don't
yeah, we'll just
understand liability, because that's what waivers are for. And of
yeah,
course
I
there's
think
always a risk. You can't
right,
guarantee
right.
someone's safety, but boy, how do how do you highlight your good officers and the cool things that you're doing if you don't give people a chance to come take a peek? It's like that's a big chance for someone to roll the dice on if they haven't gotten a peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, I agree with you. We got towards the end, we got rid of them. And now they may have come back. Obviously, I've been gone for almost 3 years, but there was a lot of agencies where I worked at, and just talking to different agencies, the liability, not feeling like it was something that we could do effectively, so we'll just get rid of it. Again, I think we get back to structural organization of, do we have the right people in place to make these programs and initiatives work? With the chief, if he's a go-getter, he or she cannot do all that stuff. If they got there on work ethic and talent, they're going to have to change because they can't do that. They're not going to be able to do their job and do the things they used to do. So finding sub leaders, finding developing people to offshoot those really important programs and run and lead them and give them the autonomy to do that, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can I can attest to that. If you're a chief and you're running the ride along program, you probably got bigger problems. Um, but if you're a chief in an agency that doesn't have ride-alongs, you better be asking the question why, and what would prevent you from highlighting and showcasing your agency.
Yeah,
Anyway, I
I
digress.
totally agree. No, it's a
So
great thing.
so you so you come out of the Army and you meet this woman who's got her together, for lack of a better terms. And you're
Totally
like,
true.
wow, that's what adulting is like you're not living in the basement at mom and dad's house. You actually
So
have a
true.
job with like insurance and benefits. Like, what are those?
And she
uh
said, "Yeah, I even have a dog, a Yorkie." I said, "Wow, this is amazing."
yeah, men and women, this could be another conversation. The prefrontal cortex of a man is generally not fully developed until about age 25. I might say for me it was closer to 30, if it's ever happened. But yeah,
So true.
that's
I agree with you. I was a rockhead, meeting Kristen was watching somebody with a career. I think that's really what she was she's still in education, and watching her, she was a 6 years teacher when I met her at 25. She got hired at 21 and right out of college, and she already had a master's at 25 when I met her. Like, she was already out of school and already done all that, and already 6 years into her career, and we we're the same age. I mean, 13 days apart, and that was meeting her and seeing like where her career track was and what her life was a reminder of, man, I'm 25. I have a high school diploma. I live at home in my parents' house. I live sleep in a twin bed. I don't have a job. It was stress. It was a stressful time, that transition of like, man, I got to get my stuff together. Everyone else is 25 at my age is like in their job, and if you're not, there's usually like an asterisk by your name why you're not having a career, So,
well,
um,
let's also give credit where credit is due. You also served your country. You served, not only just served, but served in combat, which are really two distinct things that I think people need to understand. So you did invest, and there were lessons that you were learning and gaining that people that took the college route aren't going to get. They're not going to receive. And one might say that those, while one set of lessons is forged in fire, the other is gleaned in academics. Both are important, and neither one is mutually exclusive. They benefit each other. There's synergy there, especially if you can get involved in a good team. But
I
suffice it
agree.
to
Yeah.
say, in your case, that was the motivation for you to look for this career. Look at something where you can take the skills that you learned, particularly when you were talking about what you were doing with civil affairs, because you said something that I wanted to come back to. You said the key word, right? We can glean better information by building relationships. And in policing, whether you want to agree with it or not, above all else, we're in the information business. And we are useless without good information. It's just like in the intelligence world. And so that's why programs like data driven, that are intelligence led, whatever name you want to call it, community policing, it's all about relationships. It's all about information. And if you understand that and you're good at it, man, you're gonna crush it. But
So
if you
true.
think that you can just muscle your way through the streets, it's not going to work, and probably going to backfire. And I think some of those things, we learned some of those lessons as a profession the hard way, particularly in the last decade.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a family unit when you have dysfunction or toxicity. Like I've learned to not be afraid of it. Like if we want to get better at this, and it's easy for me to say from the outside now. I left, 2 years ago, but I still care so much about it, Patrick. I think about it all the time, just like you, what P2's doing. And I realize finding people like us, finding each other post retirement, post career, and still wanting to do work in it is, to me, it says everything you need to know. Like these are people that are in it for the right reason. So, yeah, I think if we have hard truths and hard conversations, and in the interest of inclusion, and wanting to get better, I hope that we can get to that. I think we're in this phase now, and it shows like yours and everyone else that as former chiefs, that's how we get the impact is people that walk those roads and have led to high levels to acknowledge, hey, we need to make some growth and changes.
Yeah, and there's always room for it. It doesn't matter, you have to commit to being a lifelong learner, and you have to commit to having an open mind, and you have to trust people, right? It's you just like you mentioned earlier, you can't do it alone. Nobody does it alone. It really doesn't matter where you are in the organizational structure. You've got an important role, and if you do it well, and oftentimes we do a good job of teaching. Well, maybe we don't do a good job of it, but I think we have the framework of and a value of understanding what leadership and training can bring. But sometimes you also have to learn to be a good follower, and I think that's the military does that exceptionally well. They work well on both ends of the spectrum, because if you don't know how to be a good follower, you're never going to be a good leader.
Mm. That's a
And
great point. I don't think I talked to this in my book, and you made me think about this now, but and it might not be in there. I might have cut that out. There was a lot of kind of things that hit the floor during the editing process, but one of them is the kind of the fiefdom, or the chiefdom, I call it. And that depends where you're at, geographically, and what the system, how it's set up organizationally. But I can only speak to Pennsylvania. We have the third most municipalities in the country. It's a huge state with tons of municipalities, and without drastic oversight, chiefs really don't have anyone to report to. I know they have the elected bodies, but I mean, my experience, I've seen, elected bodies that aren't made up of law enforcement officers. They have other challenges and pain points and things they're working on. So they really have to trust, the chief and other department heads that the information they're saying is true and correct, because I have to believe you. So that always is going to present a potential for corruption, a potential for, no one's really following up on me. No one really is overseeing me. I'm an integral person. That's how I got here. But over time, I'm a human. We're left to our devices if we don't have accountability. In the military, I would have to stand at parade rest as a staff sergeant, talking to an E7, one rank above me. Roger that, sergeant. No, sergeant. And then turn right around and talk to my guys who would stand at parade rest for me. There's such a structure, and you don't even realize it when you're in it, but there's such a structure to respect and discipline. And you said it the best, my brother, is the best leaders, the absolute best ones I've been around are great and tremendous followers.
well, that it's just the natural order of things, and because that makes you a good team member, and teamwork is what makes everything successful. And there can be a lot of ways to get it done, and of course, it can cause conflict when people have a difference of opinion. But
Absolutely.
before
Yeah.
we go down that road, let's kind of touch on you early in your career, because one of the things that I think was so powerful and impactful about your book and is your ability to really, I think, just kind of open up and share your story. And I think one of the problems that we have in policing is that we're not willing to do that. We're not willing to be vulnerable because we're trained not to be. You're trained to be a take charge leader, get things done. You're the first officer on scene. You're the leader. You're directing. you're supervising, you're telling all the other responders, if it's a police related emergency, what's going to get done, who's going to do what. And you learn this at a very early time in your policing career. But what we have not always done a good job in is also teaching people, like, well, how do we open up when things are impacting us, whether it's a professional question, whether it's a a personal struggle that you're having based on trauma that you're experiencing or other things. So maybe get into a little bit of that story and what you wrote about in the book, and really kind of like, what was your driving force behind that?
Behind what specifically? I missed.
Behind you sharing, like, what was the impetus for
The
you to say, look, I need to share my story?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a great question because I didn't want to multiple times. And I talk about this in the book that I tried not to write the book. And I kept being nudged back to do this. So I think for me was I left policing with my head low. My head, not a little, very shamed, trying to figure out like what went good, what didn't went well. How did this end up to being the way it was? Just right or wrong, just doing a reprisal and really deep reflection on things. And what I learned is I tried to run away and not really want to come back to the policing profession, not want to think about it, feeling a sense of betrayal and hurt that was so deep for me that I'm just going to move on and do something else. As an empath, as a compassionate person, a social person, a person I think I care about other people tremendously. I have strong relationships. I continue to forge them. So what happened over the last 2.5 years is cops from all around the country messaging me, texting me, scheduling phone calls. Can I jump on a Zoom with you? And hearing so many of the same pain points, the same struggles. Maybe it's not the exact same, but they can relate to the overarching themes of anxiety, of being targeted or not being trusted or being micromanaged or all these negative things that just come with working in policing. It's not a negative thing per se if we can talk about it and work through it, but it became it's something I heard from so many of I can't even talk about it. I don't know where I could talk about it to. I don't have anyone to open up to. I can't talk about this in my agency. That's really what started to just weigh me down. And as a leader, I think I couldn't hide in my basement. I told my wife, earlier this year in January when we were trying to figure this thing out, if I'm going to do this or not, and praying a lot to God. And I told her I'm not wired, and God did not make me in a way to hide in my basement and watch other people get hurt. I can't do it. I can't do it. I won't do it. And if I have to sacrifice myself along the way, bear with me 1 second.
Yeah, I
If I have to
appreciate you sharing.
sacrifice my time, my money to help people, that's the only thing I know how to do. I don't know how to hide and watch people get struggle. I can't do it. So that's really the emphasis of the book. Is I don't want to write it. I knew that maybe some of the problems it could bring, but there's also blessings to it. But I know there's so many people in that profession that you served at a high level, that I served in, that I think are just great human beings that have such a noble mission. And if we don't give them ability to get their voice out, or if I didn't share a little bit of me to be vulnerable with them and say, look, I was leading my agency in arrests. I was an expert in 3 different areas. Like, I wasn't the guy that was like the last man on the squad. I was the go-getter. I was the foundational piece of that agency. And so if I can be vulnerable, so can you. And if you can be vulnerable, you're probably going to have more of a healthy life. And I know we can do it just by sharing more together. And reading Brene Brown, really the Power of Vulnerability by Brene Brown, that really helped me, 4 or 5 years ago. Reading that was sharing more, storytelling, being empathetic, being vulnerable. Our experiences are so much more connected if we just share them, and then we can get over them. Much like coaching, I think coaching can have powerful effects similar to therapy, but it's completely different than therapy. I think coaching can actually help people in tremendous ways, cops, to help us get back on the horse. Maybe 1 or 2 sessions, 3 sessions. Maybe I just need somebody in my corner, someone to lift me up or remind me how freaking awesome I am. So coaching can have really empowering effects in our team. So yeah, that's the nexus for it, brother, is wanting to help and wanting the cops to understand they don't have to sit in silence and choke down their tears or choke down their pain. There is another way.
So you've mentioned P2 a couple of times, and then I think for most people that are listening probably are familiar, but that's Performance Protocol, and that is a coaching company. And what you're describing is really one of the foundational principles behind this. And it was one of the and I had Daniel Folk on one of our first episodes. You really just asking him, well, why did you decide to pivot from using the executive coaching model and taking that digital platform and moving it into working with law enforcement? It was because people were seeking him out, and people inside of law enforcement. And I don't like to rehash this story too many times because I keep finding myself saying it, but I didn't work with a coach until it was about year 25 in my career, and it was part of a different program that I was doing that forced me to do it. It was a very, very uncomfortable thing, but 20 minutes into it, I was like, man, like, the epiphany hit me, and like they often do sometimes, right? Like, where's this been? Like, why haven't I been doing this? And for all the reasons and a lot more, right? What you just said, sometimes you just got to connect with somebody that understands what you're experiencing because they've been there, but they're in a different social circle, and they can give you really good feedback, and they can really ask you the right questions that you need to be asking yourself, right? It's not about giving advice. It's not about telling people what they should do. It's really about just making them aware of what their value is, and how to negotiate some of these challenging times, because I don't care where you are in the organization. First year officer, 25, 30-year veteran, chief, it doesn't matter. I mean, and I've had people say that to me a lot. Well, you're a chief. Well, yeah, but guess what? When you're a chief, you're even more isolated than you are as when you're an officer, because there's only one of you per agency, and there's a lot of competing ideas and opinions, and so being vulnerable sometimes can be seen as a sign of weakness, and but it's not, right. It really is a matter of just getting to a higher level of understanding. So that's pretty cool. And we don't have to go into the whole story in your book, and again, I'll tell people just come back and read it. But at a high level, what were some of the ramifications for you as you started experiencing some of this conflict inside your organization? Like, hey, I think I'm doing a good job. I'm loving what I'm doing. I'm working really hard. I'm taking opportunities to help others. And now suddenly I feel like, maybe there's a target on my back, or there's a pressure here that I'm carrying that is starting to weigh me down. And, what were the coping mechanisms there?
That's a great question. And I think this is where so many cops can relate to. Not the first thing I want to say is not unilaterally casting blame anywhere or at anyone is probably the best thing that we can all do in law enforcement during this reimagining phase. There's never one thing that's to blame. There's never one person that's to blame, and just listening and having conversations. So this is going to be, this kind of talk is great. I was already going through some challenges at that time, personally, unresolved to military experiences, stuff that I wasn't dealing with. I was a perfectionist. So I had to be the best. I wanted to be the best. I will put the time and training and everything in to be the best. As long as the results are good and everything's good, that's success kind of lied to me a little bit. So when I went through the workplace stuff that I went through, I started to really adapt unhealthy coping strategies. So I was always a social drinker. And, when I went in the military, of course, sure, that's a very drinking culture, substance culture. But still, I was always a very social drinker. It wasn't a weekly type of thing. But then I found myself in 2019, 2020, using alcohol every night. And it became one of those things that I just justify. I remember my wife getting upset with me. She would see the double IPA, the 4 double IPA cans lined along the kitchen sink, along the back wall to go out to recycle. That's where we put our recycling. And she would come home from work teaching, and it'd be 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There's 4 double IPA cans lined up, and I was off that day. Now I'm back in patrol. I haven't been back in patrol in 8 years, and that was a new transition for me. It wasn't something I asked to do, so that was something I was working through as well. So there's a lot of layers to it of me, the emotional mental health, which was the alarm bells were ringing, and I had to figure out what those bells were. So the stress and anxiety. I remember driving into work, 2019, 2020, doing breathing exercises, having the anxiety in my belly and having to sit there for 5, 10 minutes and breathe before I walked into the building. Because what I perceived is to walk into this anxious place. Now, whether it's perceptions or realities, I think this is where the lived experiences that we can all get to a place of storytelling and listening to, our stories, our experiences. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them. Doesn't mean you have to understand them. Just listen to them. I'll listen to yours, you listen to mine. And I think if we do that, we'll find out, oh, I had anxiety too. Oh, you do breathing exercise. Okay. Does that work for you? So those are the things that I started to work through. I really attacked my mental emotional health. I realized that, my wife had a 10-year-old bottle of Vicodin up in the cabinet, sitting there for her second child. 10 years been sitting there. One of the things you just throw away. I'm a cop. I'm an undercover detective. I'm doing, working. But in 2019, when I'm at my lowest and I wanted to feel not being in pain, it's amazing the thoughts that come into your head from all those conversations as a drug officer. Hearing people tell me about Vicodin or Percocet and what it does to them, and I'm curious. Yep. I would ask questions to learn. And you learn, you put it in your brain, but but now those thoughts are coming in because now I'm in a place of pain and my brain was struggling. I'm trying not to feel the hurt, not to feel the betrayal, not to feel the pain, not to feel the sadness and depression. So I'm drinking 2 beers and I go in the medicine cabinet. There's these 10-year-old Vicodin pills that sure, I'll take them. Yeah. Somebody, informant told me 5 years ago, these things will make you feel great. You'll melt into the couch and you won't feel anything for 3 hours. And guess what? He was right. He was right. That shame though, the shame of like, what happened? Like, is it me? Look at you. You're doing Vicodin and drinking. Like, it's you, bro. It is definitely you. And that for me was just a really scary time because my mental health really took a plummeted down. And then it was actually Thanksgiving in 2019, is when it was kind of a crescendo moment. I was already having really, really depressed and was driving home that Thanksgiving after that next day, like 6:30 in the morning, we worked 6 to 6, that I'm driving home on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. There's not a soul around. And cause it's Black Friday now, 6 in the morning, Black Friday. And, just seeing these overpasses, I approach them. I'm just ruminating thoughts. Again, this is subconscious. These aren't, I'm not telling myself, oh, you're ruminating on these negative thoughts. This could be problematic for you.
Yeah.
Right. So the ruminating of the thoughts. Well, I thought if I drive my car off this overpass, it's going to hit the ground, blows up, screw you, everybody, you'll feel my pain and I won't feel my pain anymore. And that moment because at that time, I thought I had absolutely no control over my life. It was an illusion. It was wrong. It was not true. But based on everything going on, it was this feeling that I had no say or much less say or control than I thought I should have. Again, these are all perceptions that we have to work through. And, but that sense of control of driving my car off the overpass for just that split second brought me like a sense of comfort, like a sense of, all right, this isn't as bad as I think it is. So I kept driving and, ruminating again, a couple minutes goes by, you're starting to get in your thought process again. This is before I learned about the voice in our head that we all have to some degree and how to shut it off when it's acting up and things I learned how to do. But at that point I didn't know. And that's where, getting back to the why I wrote the book, another thing I want to help is police suicide. If we can save some more lives and realize that things aren't nearly as bad as we think they are, and drive those numbers down, bring them down. So I got home and told my wife what happened. She was terrified and crying. And I saw the look in her face of, fear. And our family was breaking apart, that look. And that put more shame on my plate. Like, what am I doing wrong? And so that fed the suicidal ideation. But by telling my wife, by being vulnerable to my wife, which I hadn't been, because I was the protector, I was the rock for our family. You had a problem, you came to me. I solve our family problem. Now I'm the one and stressed out and in distress. So, but that, Patrick, I'm telling you, that was when I opened up to my wife and started sharing. And then she said, you have to share every bit of this journey with me, or we're not going to make it. Like, we have to be absolutely fully transparent, or we're never going to survive this. And she was right. And I said, okay, I will. So, and getting back to the vulnerability, I think it's so important for us, even in the workplace. I think we can do it as leaders and do it in a way that, I did this. I remember being in Iraq and telling guys, hey guys, this is a bad situation. I'm a little scared too, but guess what? We're going to get through it because we're going to work together and we're going to push this stuff together. But I'm not going to sit there and act like this isn't scary. Yeah, this is a tough situation, but I know we got the talent and the training and resource to do this, so we're going to do it together. So it's that empowerment. I think if you're just vulnerable all the time, it's and not being empowering or positive, I think that's where it becomes toxic. But I think leaders carefully throwing out at certain times is vulnerable stuff. And I reference Chief Elliot Moya in Maine, because Chief Moya walked in, a couple of years ago to his police department and told his guys he was struggling and he's in therapy. And that changed everything. Some of those guys into therapy, they talk about it in a roll call. And it was just from the chief executive saying, "Hey guys, it's okay. This is a hard job. I'm in therapy." Like, whoa, it's breaking down those stigmas of biases.
Yeah, so that a lot. You covered a lot of ground there, and I think the most it's all important, right? But I think that maybe the most profound part there is just opening up to your wife, and then her, I think just it's like, I'm going to grab you by the coat and we're going to pull you here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really powerful, and you're very fortunate to have someone like her in your corner, because
Very.
sometimes you do worry about, and maybe this is the lesson, like, if for people that don't have someone like that in their life, where do you turn, where do you go? And I think the answer is, there are a lot of resources out there. A lot of great groups like Safe Leo and others that are now doing great work in this space, because there's always somebody, and it's important that you do open up and you do share, because let's just face it. And we hear the statistic that the average police officer will experience, I think it's around 108, I think there's 182 traumatic events throughout the course of their career, compared to the average citizen, where it might be two or three. And I haven't read that study, because what I want to know is what's the classification for a traumatic event? Because
Right.
I think
Well, I think
180 is low. Like,
yeah.
I really
Well,
think,
this
think
is,
you could do that in a month, depending on how busy you are,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Where you work at, what agency? I
Right.
think this is a great conversation because I was talking to my brother about this. He's also a police officer. He got promoted to sergeant. I'm really proud of him. And we talked about this a lot. We have this way in law enforcement, we compare, and we did it in the military too. So I remember when I came back from Iraq, it was like, well, how many firefights, or how many IEDs did you have, or how many tours did you do? We love to compare. Oh, I did 4. You only did 3. So like now the guy who did 3 combat tours isn't as squared away as the guy who did 4. And it's a horrible way. We do this with trauma. Oh, well, you and me, Patrick, could be on the same fatal car accident. You've seen a lot of these, you've processed it, you have a good structure to your life, you have self-care is important to you, like you have these things I don't know about. You're my partner, and you navigate that no problem. I don't have those things and I'm struggling, but I'm watching you coast through those things, and I'm thinking to myself, shit, something must be wrong with me because this guy's crushing it, man. Like, and so I don't share because I don't want you to judge me. I'm a tough guy just like you are, Patrick. I can do the same job you can do. We got to stop that comparing thing. It's okay. It's okay for things to bother us and not bother other people. It's okay for, I lost a 10-month-old. We lost a 10-month-old child that was drowning incident. And that was 2020 during COVID, during the riots. That affected me. It was May of 2020. It affected me profoundly, having children and watching this human life fall and die at 10 months old. But people around me, I'm not naive. I was crying. I had to excuse myself from the scene. I mean, I couldn't even, as tears are streaming down my face, audible crying. It affected me so profoundly. And I'm embarrassed. I'm walking past EMS and everything, and we set up a crime scene. But I know not everyone on the scene cried like I did that day. And I just have to recognize, we have to recognize that we're all going to have different outbursts, and that might be, or different reaction. That might be tied to childhood experiences, might be tied to stuff we're doing in our life right now. That might be tied to maybe one of our nephews or nieces are sick at home. Like, there's so many things. And if we judge and compare, we're never going to move forward. We're never going to reimagine things to get people to come and say, you know what? You're going to come to do this job that is really dangerous, and you're going to probably guaranteed to change as a result of it. But it's the most noble job you can do. It's the most impactful thing you can do in your community. Oh, well, I'll sign up for that. Right? We set that expectation, and we also say we're going to have a really dangerous job that's going to change you, but we're going to create strong culture to allow you to thrive in these and survive and thrive in these roles. And we can't just do one and ask you to do this hard job and not support you in the back end. It's a tough proposition to ask.
Yeah. So I think one of the lesson here is, there is an opportunity for us in our profession to, on day one, and I know you talk about this in your book as well, on day one, set the standard for how we're going to prepare officers for the future. Not just from a tactical and a technical perspective, but from an emotional resiliency perspective. And it's interesting that we all come to this from different angles. My background, how I really got started in wellness work was I was really interested in fitness and nutrition. I was really looking at the peak performance perspective of, how do I make myself the best police officer, best SWAT officer I can be. And I was just really lucky. I say this a lot, to have stumbled across some information written by author. His name is Phil Maffetone. He wrote a book called In Fitness and Health, and he trains triathletes for a living. And in this book, he was talking about training like Mark Allen, Mike Pigg, these guys, like winning the Ironman like 6-7 times in a row, like these super world-class athletes. But he was the first person that where I ever read in the training process and in their background, looking at physical, emotional, and spiritual health. Like these, all three of these things are connected. And so it kind of made me sit back and then really start. And this was in the mid to late 90s, right? So wow. I did my first wellness class, I think, in 1998 for my police department, 98, 99.
Wow, you were way ahead of the time.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. Like it wasn't planned. It was just kind of one of those things where, like, oh my God, police officers are dying like over 20 years, below the national average. Like our mortality rates from cardiovascular disease are through the roof.
So you just being a curious leader, right? You're like trying to figure this stuff out, like not accept it. And that's why I think we need to get as leaders, not accept these things, not accept it.
Well, right. It's like, so, well, okay, now that we know, what do we do about it? And you see a lot of this, particularly back then. I think the military has changed a lot of the ways, right? But I used to call it the military mentality, is that everything was inevitable. Like, dude, forget it, man. It's going to happen regardless. And, you had, even from a rank structure and everything else, and everything evolves. Right. And
yep.
I'm like, well, shit, because I went into the service right out of high school and then went back to college, and then I worked in the restaurant business for a few years. And then I was 27 when I started my policing career. So I'm not 22, but I got thinking, I'm like, okay, let me look at these numbers. If the average lifespan of a male in the United States is 83, and now I subtract 20 from that, that's 73, that's 63. If I work into my mid 50s in policing and then I retire, oh, well, now I see why cops are dying in that first 5 years of retirement, because all of the stress and all of the impact that they're putting on their body during this career, all the things that they're carrying, the body's cashing in. There's no way to avoid it. So I was like, okay, well, if I know that now, what can I do from a preventative perspective to kind of, resiliency wasn't the word I was using back then. I was just like, all right, how do I keep this from happening? Because I want to live, a long productive life. There's things that I want to do beyond policing. So yeah, I mean but it really opened my eyes. So I was lucky in that I kind of got that early peak, and it really just changed the way that and again, it changed the lens in which I'm looking at things. And I was a crime scene photographer back then too. So I was always going to, I was taking pictures of the worst things ever. Right. And it really, if you're a photographer, right, and you're familiar with lenses and different lens work, aperture. So there's kind of like all these, like, I guess, technical expressions that you can use. But for me, it was kind of like, okay, I saw a couple of these puzzle pieces click together. But just because you know it and you're aware of it doesn't mean that people are also going to openly accept what you're talking about. But I think, through the work of Kevin Gilmartin and others, when he wrote Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, I've been very fortunate to have, presented with him now several times. I came from it, we came from like opposite ends of the spectrum. Like he came from the emotional and the psychology side. I came from the physical fitness and nutrition and, what we can do there. And now what we're learning is that, guess what? they're all interrelated and interconnected. You can't focus on just one, because that you'll do so at the expense of something else,
Mm.
and it'll come back to get you.
Yeah,
So,
definitely will. It's the
so
same thing with the muscles, man. Like I think it's great we lift, and police departments put gyms in their agencies, and we get these buzz slogans and motivational quotes. And I think, oh, that's great. But what are we doing for this? Are we culturally and institutionally pushing and encouraging this? We tell you, we put loud rap music on while we're lifting, while we're doing curls. That's great. Are we using the same rap music as, hey, now you curled your biceps, go curl your brain, go work this thing out, go take a walk, go talk to a therapist, how you doing on your meds? Like, are we thinking about the full spectrum wellness? Are we talking about this? That's not sexy or fun. I know, like lifting weights, putting slogans is sexy and fun. But we got to stop making policing so sexy and fun. Like sometimes it's rolling up your sleeves, and especially leadership. It is a messy, muddy process.
yeah, and so I think that's kind of it. There's an opportunity, right? And so every time we learn a lesson the hard way, it's an opportunity. There's an opportunity there to share it, to prevent somebody else from learning it there as well, learning it the hard way. And that's why, I joke about it, but trial and error learning is not an efficient way to learn. It's a very inefficient way to learn. And I try to discourage, and as men, we're prone to do this from time to time, right? Like, we don't like to ask for help. We try to figure things out on our own, right? Even if at the expense of it takes us an hour long to get someplace, because we wanted to be right about directions. There's a reason these jokes are out there. But and I think the important thing to also keep in mind is that, like, you're never there, right? You're never going to have it figured out, because there's always going to be something. So I love the idea of training for that, that flexibility right up front. Like, awareness is, like, again, like in my case, I stumbled upon awareness, but it changed the way that I thought moving forward, and it gave me an opportunity to influence others through that process.
Yeah.
And
And
maybe,
I think
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I think we don't know what we get afraid of what we don't know or don't understand as a profession. And we've been doing things so long so away for so long. And I don't want to compare it to other professions because we talked about not comparing, but if we look at has there been enough evolution from a time perspective? Is it commensurate with what you would expect the outcomes to be? I don't think we've grown commensurate with how long this profession, the technology has been growing, and all these other mental health challenges. Like, we need to identify what a cop is, what we want, what the community wants from a police officer. I think some communities are still trying to figure that out. Do you want these tough-minded SWAT people to keep us safe and keep crime low? Do we want people to carry our groceries in? Do we want both? It's like there's so much of these conversations that I think communities are having now that to figure it out. And I think it's like what you said it best, is sharing our perspectives. Like, you and that perspective of wellness from the '90s, that you met probably wanted to. Some of them were interested in that perspective because they weren't thinking like that or coming from that angle.
Well, there's a responsibility that comes with knowledge too. And that's oftentimes why people don't want to hear it, because if they hear it, then they feel the responsibility that they need to do something about it. And that can create some conflict, because they may not have the resources to be able to do it. Or they may not know where to go. And there is another opportunity, I think, to be able to grow the profession as well. Yeah, I do. So, I do consulting calls on technology and other things as well. I was talking to a technology leader. He's looking at bringing, like, something into the law enforcement space, and he used this expression that I had to write it down, and it really chuckled out loud. He said, in policing, you guys are what he's like, you're kind of technological laggards. And I just laughed out loud, and he said, yeah, it feels like you guys are about, on average about 10 years behind the curve when it comes to using new technology. And I think I caught him off guard when I laughed out loud, because I was like, first of all, I was like, that was just a really nice way of saying you guys suck at implementing new technology. And I'm like, and truth be told, we're about 20 years behind, not 10. Yeah. But there's a reason for that, right? Because why? We don't have research and development budgets. Budgets are compressed, they're very tight. And so this, I have a lot of empathy for chiefs, because for all the things that you were just talking about, all these expectations from your community, nationally, state level, local level, about what the expectations are of us, of you, without really even a true understanding of what it is that you're doing with your time and what you're
Right.
even capable of. And so if we overtask and under resource right from the word go, we're setting you up for failure.
Hmm.
And what's a police officer taught from day one? You're taught to be a problem solver. I got this. And this is where I think, and I've talked about this before, but I think chiefs sometimes are their own worst enemies, because they take that. I've got a can-do attitude. Look at me. I've got this rank. I've been chosen to go out and lead this department, whatever. And now we're offering ourselves up to go solve problems rather than
Right,
rather
right.
than maybe taking a step back and saying, when you present a problem to me, maybe the first thing that we should evaluate is, whose responsibility is this?
Hmm.
And um, if it is a police responsibility, what resources are you willing to share in order for me to be able to successfully negotiate what this challenge is? Because if we don't do that, if we just accept blindly because our ego tells us we can do this, man, we're in big trouble. And it's hard for us not to do that. I'm guilty of it, right? Like, yeah, I'll figure it out.
100%.
I'll find a way to get it done.
Well,
Um,
I think leadership is. I mean, you bring up great points, and this is where being graceful towards our leaders. Also, it goes both ways. You know, if we have high expectations as officers of our chain of command of our leadership, and they have the same of us. So if we demand them X, Y, and Z, they demand the same of us. So it's a relationship. It's collaboration. It's give and go. And to see officers sit around a water cooler and talk trash on chain of command, that's to me is like a coup de grace of a broken agency of like we got to keep momentum going. I know it happens everywhere. It's part of being in a workplace culture, but if it's something that becomes a consistent part of our routine, we look forward to eating meals so we can sit here and talk trash on people. We have to get out of that mindset, and empowering people to be positive. I think is going like a chief that can delegate more, develop talent, find out where the strengths and resources are in their department, and then cast that responsibility. Hey, this is on you. We will rise and fall based on how you doing this. And by the way, we want you to do well. We're going to give you every resource and available. But if you do well at this, that's going to help all of us. And that, by the way, I don't have to do that. I can focus on doing X, Y, and Z for us. Collaboration is so important, I think, in any organization, but police work where seemingly we have some silos. You have detectives, you have patrol, you might have an undercover unit that sits in another building off-site a mile across town. I've seen those before. So it's hard. It's a fluid environment. Every day is different and dynamic, and it really takes strong leaders that probably can listen more, understand more, connect with humans more, influence more, master communicators. All the things that we think aren't really good that probably are the things that would make us better at our job.
yeah. And, yeah, some great points there. And again, I think it all begins with the question, like, what can I do? Before I ask someone else to solve a problem, what can I do personally to be a part of the solution, not be a part of the problem, right? And
Right, right. That
there's
self leadership is important. We teach cops to lead themselves, be master at leading yourselves, and we lead from the front with that culture, that mindset. It's cheap, it's free, and it's a consistent thing that we can do right now. We can start to make inroads now. How we can empower ourselves just by being more positive, just by being more collaborative, just by being a little more vulnerable. We can start to teach our officers to self-lead. When we become masters at leading ourselves, we're going to be great followers. We're going to be much better. But officers are not going to follow self-leadership if the people above them aren't doing the same thing. So it just requires that trust and credibility.
Yeah, and I would encourage listeners to go back and listen to the episode with Michael Irwin. Michael Irwin he's a West Point grad, and he wrote a book called Lead Yourself First. The foreword in that book was written by Jim Collins. Everybody knows, the author of Good to Great. And he's also the CEO of Team Red, White, and Blue. So maybe you're familiar with him as a veteran. You can't go to a
Awesome.
race without seeing Team RWB there, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And that book was so profound when I read it. And so I just was very fortunate to get him on the show and get to talk to him about it. But one thing I didn't know before before I chatted with him is that he is the son of two police officers. Both
Wow.
his mom and dad were police officers in Syracuse, New York.
It's
Mom
pretty
kind of a
cool.
trailblazer. Women in policing. So just kind of a cool perspective about how that background even shaped him as a young person, and his desire to serve, and then going and doing that at a very high level in the
Yeah,
army, and now in his post-military career. But
that's incredible. That's
yeah,
incredible. Can I tell
Winston
you a quick story?
Churchill, Jane Goodall. I mean, like like some of the people, the stories that President Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, these people, like he talks about how in how they manage crisis, and the things that how they looked inward. Really, really powerful stuff.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's funny. I coach both my son's football teams, flag football teams, and it's a pretty competitive league. It's fun, and but we focus on culture. I tell it's the fourth year I've been doing this, and we really focus on culture. I tell the parents that I set that expectation on day one that the better player, the talent is not going to reign supreme here. I mean, this is a development league. They're children. We're going to teach them how to be a master at self leading and how to be great teammates, and all that stuff all the winning will take care of itself. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it'll happen. And what's happening is both teams are doing really really well. My son, who's 13, I this year I started having him call. I started mentoring him in the offseason to call all his own plays for the offense. He's a quarterback. And this year, if he's 4-0, I'm talking about the team at 4-0, and I might have called 3 or 4 plays all year. I say this to say, last year or in the winter, he's, I can't, I'm 13 years old. Like, I'm not going to be able to call my own plays. I got the offense I'm thinking about, and that's your job as a coach. I said, like, why wouldn't you call the plays? I said, because I'm not going to be around forever, son. And if I can develop you to self lead and call your own plays, you won't need a play caller. You won't need a coach. Now, you could get a coach, and you should have a coach. But the whole point is the whole ethos of the whole team, I tell, is self lead, is be master preparers, put yourself in the absolute best light. Then you need less people. Don't need as much. You're not so needy. You're not so dependent on everyone else. And that's another thing with law enforcement. I think cops are struggling for resources and support. So of course they're going to complain. They're going to bring things to the table that other people don't. Because I think that they're stemming for connection. They're stemming for some more support.
Yeah, what you're talking about is leading from high expectations, and you never know what your true potential is if people only set the minimum standards for you. And if good, if and this it's another reason why like one of our required reading books at my agency was Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, and I think most people have read that book, or a lot of people in law enforcement. If you haven't, you should. But he's got a line in that book where he talks about you get what you tolerate, not just personally, but everywhere in life. Right? You can see that everywhere you go. If it doesn't matter if you're going to McDonald's, which this is a terrible example because I don't think I've been to a McDonald's in 20 years, but I'm not a fast food eater, and I would encourage others. And I say this, the
Stay
caveat
away.
being, you can go to McDonald's and eat healthy. It's just really hard.
Yeah,
You're going to have to use another one of Jocko's mindsets, and you're going to have to be extremely disciplined.
exactly. And it's not even cheap anymore. So we can't even use that argument.
I know.
Things have
Yeah.
gone up. So stay
Well,
away
there's
from fast
always,
food.
well, it's a double cost, right? It's pay now or pay later.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but that's a whole nother conversation that I'm happy to go down that road, but we don't have enough time. We're getting towards the end, but all right. So with that in mind, let's start to wrap this up. Well, I knew we'd be going long. In your book, The Holy Trinity, what are the three things that you're trying that what are the three Trinity? What is the Trinity that you're talking about in this book for professional development, and what you think will help build a healthy police organization?
Yeah, culture, leadership, and wellness are the three things, the three areas. Culture being kind of the main one, but I lumped the three of them in the other two because we can't get to good culture without being well, without being having good leadership. So just looking at organizations, anybody can do this. Anybody can look at an organization, a police department, any company, and look at the top, and you can kind of see based on who is at the top and what their ethos are, what their philosophies are, what their values are. That's going to trickle down, and you're going to see what that organization tends to be a mirror of what the chief executive is. So I advocate that culture is everything. Culture, all decisions, all conflict, all process, all progress, everything is flows through the culture. And if we treat it like that, where it's not about one person, it's about the culture, about the system. It's set by the top, and then that modeling example goes all the way down through good leadership and having well leaders. So, yeah, that's really the core crux of it, and how we get there. I don't lay everything out per se, but there is a lot in there that I think any organization can do that is pretty cost effective. It's a very holistic approach. My book is a very holistic. I don't make any reference about throwing more money at the solution. I actually think more money, in some respects, has caused problems in my perspective. I know cops that make 150,000 a year, 140,000 a year, and they're with a high school diploma. Not that that's bad, that's a great thing. But if we also didn't develop that officer, which so many agencies aren't doing, and I work in a very affluent area, if we're not developing those humans, they're going to fall to their baseline again. And I know so many examples of cops that I know have violated their personal values and virtue during their career that they wouldn't have done otherwise. And we have to ask the question, why? Like, what happened? An officer specifically that has multiple kids, a devout Catholic, has left his family for a mistress, ran into the arms of a mistress that I know he doesn't want to do. I know that officer doesn't believe it. How did that happen? Why don't we ask those questions? We just assume, that's police work. Yeah, don't divorce. Half of us are divorced. We just accept these things. I don't accept that at all. I look at a man who's broken. I look at a man who's making decisions based on navigating in an unhealthy environment or an unhealthy personal lifestyle. But I don't think for a minute that person made that decision because that's what he wants to do. He didn't violate his personal values. So, but that we laugh that stuff off. So how can we get back to not laughing that stuff off, and we actually say, hey man, I think you have a problem. I think you need to get help. It takes a lot of courage and vulnerability to speak that way, and I think that starts from within, all through the culture.
That's a great observation, because I think in the current, and maybe in one of the things that we really have been forced to examine internally, I'm talking nationally as a police culture, is this idea of mutual accountability. Like, you're responsible for the decisions that your partners make. And let me ask you this question. As a policing culture, do you think we're good at that, or do you think we're not?
I think it's a good question. I think we're not good at that. I think to offer such a generalization, and I want to make sure I'm understanding exactly what you mean, but
well, it can be professionally or personally, right? It's nobody. And listen, I know this is not something that is unique to policing. However, policing is held to a different standard than the rest of society. Like, people have the expectations is that you are the standard bearer, and
right, yeah,
knowing that going in, when you see things that are lawfully wrong, against policy, or maybe morally wrong, what do you think causes the apprehension? What do you think it is about police culture that creates an environment where we don't confront it? We laugh it off.
Question.
Laugh it off, or we just flat out ignore it.
Yeah. Oh man.
And that's not my problem. That's his. I have my own thoughts on this, but
I would love to hear. I'll give you mine, and I'd love to hear yours.
Yeah.
So I'll try not to be so general with this because I want to be more specific. But I think the ambition and the professionalizing of the job is one aspect that has caused so many, me included, to want to go out and get a master's or go do more things and get more titles and more accolades. It's all rooted in wanting to do a good job, but like anything else, it could lead to a potential for abuse or misuse. Then on top of that, I think we hadn't developed leaders consistently and effectively. Doesn't mean there aren't good chiefs or good sergeants or good corporals. Absolutely, there are amazing leaders out there, but they're the ones that are hard to find. We need to create a profession where that's, like you said, the standard. The standard is, it's not an outlier to find a great leader. It's an outlier to find a bad leader. It's an outlier to find a selfish leader, because usually these leaders are leading from the front, modeling the behavior we want their officers to see. So we need to get that. That's one aspect of it. I think the mental health and emotional health and some of the unresolved baggage from people, not just leaders, cops too, has created just a dog eat dog culture, comparing trauma and problems and unhealthy perspectives that have now come into the workplace. So I think it's layered. I think there's so many. I think those are three that contribute to a place generally where we're not overly honest because we're afraid of being judged for what we really think. We're going to go along to get along. I don't want to show my individuality because you're going to use that against me at some point. If not today, maybe tomorrow. And I'm certainly not going to tell you when things are going bad because I know that that's not what we want to hear around it. We only want to hear when things are going good, or we only want to hear things are going great. Any sort of conflict, is what's wrong, or you're not grateful for these things. So I just think it's so layered to that. But yeah, I think here we are. Nonetheless, we are here.
Yeah, and that's great. I love we go along to get along. It's a great expression. And again, we're not policing it. It's not unique to policing, but what is unique to policing is the fact that we are required now in almost every case to wear cameras on our person, have dash cameras in our car. So everything that we do is being recorded. And now you can always be judged, and the Supreme Court through Graham v. Connor and always, right, is we can't judge through the luxury of hindsight. We have to judge from a position of what did an officer know at the time when they were acting, in taking in all of these considerations, all that. Now, that I think is the legal definition of this, but the reality is we're human beings. We're constantly judging and being judged all day long. Every interaction, we're processing this through our own lenses, and we're making sense of it. And I think this is, again, just my personal opinion, that when you know that you're being recorded and everything that you're doing, that's a lot of pressure. Like, the expectation is perfection, quite frankly, right? Because if you make a policy mistake, if you make a bad decision under pressure, you're going to be judged, and you're going to be judged under the law first, right? So if you violate law, you're not just worried about losing your job, right? You're losing, you could be criminally prosecuted for something that you did, and maybe you had no intention. And
right.
We also, if you've done this job and you've felt that extreme pressure all the time, right? Like, this is something that I don't know that anyone, unless they've been there, can truly understand what it's like to go to the death scenes, to the domestics, to the fights, to the conflict all the time, where as soon as you show up, you become the target of the vitriol, and to have that spewed at you, and to stand there and to have people on the outside expect that any normal human being can take that day in and day out, constantly, without every once in a while having an outburst, without saying something they shouldn't have, being in it. I mean, we are judging at such a granular level now, like, oh, well, he hit him 4 times, was too, well, he should have only struck him twice. And like, when you're getting down to that level, that is a lot of pressure, right? So we fear being judged by others if we judge others. And I think, and that's ultimately what creates this reluctance, because you know what? Yeah, I just watched my partner hit him 4 times when he should have only hit him twice. But you know what? I understand why that probably happens, and I can empathize with that. So, no, I'm not going to go tell the sergeant, hey, my partner struck him 4 times. He should have only struck him twice, because tomorrow I might be the one that's striking somebody 4 times instead of when somebody else thinks you should have only struck him twice. Right. And again,
that's such a good point you bring up. Like nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. You hear that all the time. It's a way to sniff out corruption and whistleblow. And I think is everything corruption? Is everything need? Yeah, right. Is everything a whistleblower? How about just get down on a knee and ask your partner, hey, man, I see you're having a bad day. What's going on? Is everything all right? Like, I don't need to report you for anything. Or maybe I did see you do something wrong, but I know who you are. I know where you came from. It can be a dog eat dog culture. And so many good ones go down because they don't know how to survive in those cultures or navigate those cultures.
Yeah, I don't like that, and I don't like and I know I've said it, and I don't even like it, and but it's a way that the public, I think, understands that you understand, and like, yeah, of course, in the bad apple argument, sure, name a profession that doesn't have people that aren't very good at what they do. Sorry,
100%. I
yeah,
actually think cops. I think cops are low hanging fruit. To be honest with you, I think we're like
we're
easy
easy
targets,
targets,
and that
absolutely, and we
frustrates the
make
heck out.
ourselves, and we don't do
100%.
ourselves any favor when we
Yes.
allow our, when we get emotionally dysregulated and we allow that to override like our good
Yeah.
judgment, our common sense,
Right. Right.
and again,
Yeah.
so there's a reason I bring this up, right? Because all of these things are they should be incentives for the general public to double down on the investment in policing, to say, look, yeah, wow, we can see it. My God, we're watching these videos now. Now you don't have to go on a ride along to get a front row seat to what cops are doing every day. You can sit at look it on your phone, watch on your desktop, whatever, and instead of looking at it as entertainment, say like, these are my fellow human beings. This
Mm.
is the way that my neighbors are treating other neighbors. This and I've People are starting to see the tails coming back around right now. Yeah, we just had a legislator get murdered, and you have carjackings. You have people
I
that
saw
are
that. Yeah.
experiencing violent crime that have never experienced violent crime before. And I think that people are now being forced to inside policing, right? We've been saying it all along. This is a bad idea. Sure, there are things that we need to get better at, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Let's
Yeah.
be selective about it. So, your book, I think, is I think it opens up the opportunity to have some really, really good discussions, not just internally inside of police departments. I think it gives everybody at all levels a good opportunity to have some self-reflection. And we should all do that from time to time, right? Like, all right,
Yeah.
what's being described here? What are the things that I'm doing? How can I improve myself? How can I be better for others, for my family? Um, yeah. Well,
Yeah, the last chapter is called Dream Chasing, and I ended there because I wanted. I know it was heavy, and I know it's a heavy topic, and I wanted to share kind of my experiences in a way that they can help people. But it was heavy. It was heavy to write that for me. So I end with Dream Chasing because I want to send the cop. I want to send the reader into a place of empowerment and positivity. Like, we are not defined by our actions and our past, and if we are telling ourselves we are, then we're in trouble. We got to get out of that mode. We are not defined by our actions in our past. Those are things that happen. We can learn tremendous from them, but we have to make changes. And there's no DeLorean, there's no 1985. We can't go backwards. So we have to just move forward
not yet
and
anyway.
that's yeah, exactly, not yet. And basically what I say with the dream chasing is I've seen a lot of officers I work with of kill themselves on overtime or really focus on that dollar. And I get it. Your family needs that dollar. I get it. I'll never say anything other than that. But what happens, I think, sometimes is we create this system in police work where we're just chasing that dollar. We're chasing the overtime. We're chasing these details. We'll burn the candle both ends. We'll take our families as hostage. That's okay because that's what's needed. Um, but what if we pull the lens back on this capitalistic approach to life and just say, what if there's more to life than money? Oh, okay. And that's all I want to highlight. So I write a chapter about like what my dreams are and my dream is and with my wife and my family and where I want to go and what I want to do. And nothing has to do with money. Those things I think will take care of itself, but that's not why I'm doing it. And I think in police work, we have to get back to service, get back to impact. All that other stuff will take care of itself. I promise it will. You're not going to be wealthy as a cop. That's not why you did it. And if we're trying to be wealthy as police officers, then maybe it's time for a new profession. But all that good stuff will take care of itself if we build a good foundation and chase the things that really add value to us.
Right on. Well, I think I disagree in one aspect. I think you can be wealthy as a police officer. It might just not be financially wealthy. I think
Yes.
you'll have a wealth of experience, and you can feel good at the end of your career that knowing that you did a lot of great things and you helped a lot of people. And not every career presents that opportunity. And so,
No,
and I
you're
think
right
we
about
do.
that.
I think we need to do a better job too of selling that. And I'm glad you're ending with dream chasing, because sometimes it feels like that I'm going down a negative path. I do that in a way because I really do want. I am concerned about the future. I would be lying if I wasn't, about the troubles that we're getting. Having bringing in new talent, the right type of person, the people that have the best character and integrity, and quite frankly, I think the skill sets to be able to handle these types of environments.
Yeah.
I think people are we look at this maybe through an old paradigm too, when we're worried about people leaving. And this just kind of close out a topic we talked about earlier, the way that we train and prepare. Maybe it's not a bad thing that we understand that 30% of our workforce might leave in the first 3 years. Maybe that's the self-selection process. Maybe they're not the right people. And if they leave your organization, oftentimes when somebody leaves your organization, it can be addition by subtraction, and a good thing for both. Like a person can go find a better fit, something that is right for them, without necessarily, taking it personally inside the organization. Like, you know what? They used me and they moved on. It's kind of like dating in high school, right?
Yeah.
So it maybe just a different mindset about that. And the dream chasing, I think, my dream would be is a significant amount of investment. Like, it's amazing to me, we can shit out $40 billion to send to Ukraine overnight, but we can't seem to find any money ever to pay our police officers to get them to training. But
Hmm.
we're willing to overtask and underfund them all the time. We're willing to help everybody else but ourselves. And I don't mean to say that we need, like, those, they're both not important. I just, to me personally, I would like to see, that type of national movement, that type of national incentive. So we can take best practices from around the country. We can take programs, and this is what I love about what Performance Protocol is doing in the coaching model, that now this is where the entrepreneurial spirit, I think, also, can, show where it has value, in that, hey, look, we've got this platform now that we can help anyone in any department anywhere in the country. So you don't have to rely on just the people that in your small circle. You can broaden your horizons with a single phone call, and in 1 hour, you can get access to information that you might have never had in your entire career. Um,
It's incredible. So,
yeah,
Ro, can we end on this? I wanted, because I think this is the coaching. This will tie it off nice.
right.
Because I want to piggyback what you said about coaching. I agree with that, and I'm coaching two professionals in local government here in Pennsylvania, and I believe it's the first municipality in PA to do this year-long performance coaching for two department heads, in a local municipality. And what I'm finding is exactly what you just said. It's an incredible team collaboration, because the town manager is doing so much, trying to drive the mission and the services, and being the chief executive of the township. He doesn't have the bandwidth or time to mentor and develop and train every department. It's just not how the system is set up. But he acknowledges it still needs to be done. So he brought me in to fill that gap. And now these ladies are doing really well, and it's not affecting the time of the municipality or any of those people. I get to pour into them in my way, the way I do it. And they're growing, and their confidence is taking off, and they're affecting the bottom line, and morale's picking up. And it's just from filling in that gap, being in that solution. Because in the military, it's weird. It's not weird. It's a great thing, but it's not possible in law enforcement, I don't think. In the military, we did all the training ourselves. We didn't outsource training. We became subject matter experts and then train our squads how to do it. Um, Police work's not like that. So if we want to save money and we want to incorporate more training opportunities, we just have to think outside the box. And coaching fills that gap. So I'm happy that P2's set up the role. I think the future's bright.
Perfect. You're kind of like a law enforcement au pair.
That's
Maybe
funny.
that's not
That's
a good
funny.
example. Yeah.
No,
All
I'll
right.
take it. I'll take it.
Let's end it at that. Hey, Chad, I really, really appreciate you being here. Great story. And I'm going to show everybody the book, Holy Trinity of Successful and Healthy Police Organizations. Successful and healthy. It is possible. Nothing's ever perfect, folks. So
Nope.
just be willing to roll up your sleeves and do your part.
Do your part. That's all you can do. And last thing, Pat, sorry, I want to, because you said this earlier, and I want to piggyback on what you just said, because it's so important. It is a journey. It's never ending. There is no destination. And that's the problem, I think, where we tell ourselves that, like, oh, I can't get there. I can't do that. We can do that when you realize there is no destination. It is every day showing up, just being the best leader you can be by being an active listener, being compassionate, also having hard truths. Your people do bad things sometimes. You got to tell them that, but doing it in a way that is collaborative, and doing it in a way that I want you to succeed, and not bring the policy manual into the meeting, but understand that policy's there. We understand that's there, and how we enforce and discipline, that's all there. But I don't need to lead with that. I don't need to finish with it. What I want to do is be a good human and help you get through this problem. If we have to, if this doesn't work, and the worst case scenario is at the end of the day, we have to come back and discipline you, do policy, that's what it's going to be. But I hope that doesn't happen, because as your boss, as your leader, I want to avoid that by helping you develop and grow. I know that that mindset and that coachability takes time and practice, but I think we can get there.
Absolutely. We'll do a session 2, and we'll talk about that. Like, discipline is not punitive; it's corrective.
Right. Exactly.
And
great.
I think when supervisors lose that message, that's when you see a spiral. But
right.
All right.
I agree.
We'll say that for next time. Thanks for being here with us. And until the next episode of the Coptimizer podcast, I'm going to be 1042. Log into www.performance-protocol and learn more about how to bring this program to your agency and community.